I didn't know which part cut deeper, the words or the way she said them. That smirk. It wasn't the smile of a new bride, it was a statement, a message, one that said, "You don't belong here." I had imagined a warm welcome, laughter, and family. Instead, I stood in the middle of their living room, surrounded by silence and unfamiliar perfume, realizing I was an outsider in my own son's life. A week later, she called. No greetings this time, no fake politeness. "The rent's overdue," she said. "Did you transfer it?" I stared at the phone for a long moment, then whispered the same words that had been haunting me since that day. "Didn't I tell you?" That was the beginning, the first crack in the facade she built. I didn't know it then, but that smirk would cost her everything. The rain had started just as the taxi turned into their street, the kind of soft drizzle that paints the world in quiet gray. I stared through the window, clutching the small box in my hand, the bracelet I'd been saving for years. I hadn't seen my son in almost 3 months. When he called last week, his voice had been distant, hurried, saying he had something important to share. I assumed it was about the wedding. He'd mentioned a woman once before, a voice on the phone named Lydia who spoke sweetly and laughed too loudly. I never imagined the next time I'd hear her name, it would be followed by wife. I rang the bell once. The door opened after a pause, just long enough to make me feel unwelcome. She stood there, tall, perfectly dressed, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be Daniel's mother," she said. Her tone carried a rehearsed politeness, the kind people use when they're forced to be nice. I nodded, forcing a smile of my own. "And you must be Lydia," I replied. The apartment smelled like new paint and expensive candles. Every photo frame on the wall held only her face, her posing by a beach, her holding a wine glass, her in a mirror. Not one with my son. I looked around quietly, trying to ignore the tightening in my chest. Daniel came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Mom! You're here!" He moved to hug me, and for a moment I felt that familiar warmth, the boy I'd raised, the man I still saw beneath the exhaustion in his eyes. But as soon as Lydia cleared her throat, his arms loosened. He stepped back. We sat in the living room. I asked simple questions, how they'd been, when the wedding would be, and if they'd decided on a date. Lydia crossed her legs, her gaze never leaving mine. "We got married yesterday," she said casually, then that smirk, "just for special people." The air left the room. Daniel didn't speak. My lips parted, but no words came out. I felt a slow sting behind my eyes, the kind you feel when you've been slapped but can't show it. I looked at my son, but he couldn't meet my gaze. "I didn't know," I said quietly. Lydia shrugged. "It was last minute," she replied, glancing at her nails. "We wanted something small. Private." For a long time, no one spoke. Rain tapped against the windows, a steady rhythm that filled the silence Daniel couldn't. When I finally stood, he followed me to the door, guilt written across his face. "Mom," he said softly, "it all happened so fast. I was going to tell you." I placed my hand on his cheek, forcing him to meet my eyes. "You don't have to explain," I said. "I understand more than you think." Outside, the air was cold and heavy. I didn't look back as I walked away, the bracelet still clutched in my hand. I had brought it to welcome a daughter. Instead, I left with something else, an ache that whispered of secrets, of something deeply wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smirk, the way she said special people, the way Daniel looked smaller beside her, as if something had already been taken from him. I tried to brush it off, to believe it was only nerves, only pride. But deep down, I knew. I had raised my son to be kind, to love with his whole heart. But kindness is a dangerous thing when handed to the wrong person. I didn't know how or when, But something in me decided that night I would find out who Lydia really was. And when I did, she'd wish that wedding had never happened. The days that followed were quiet in the way storms often are before they strike. Daniel didn't call, neither did Lydia. I told myself to let it go, to give them space, to accept that my son was married and grown, but every time the phone stayed silent, the unease in my chest grew heavier. I wasn't just hurt, I was worried. Mothers can sense when something isn't right, even when the world insists it is. On Thursday evening, I finally decided to visit again. I baked Daniel's favorite, banana bread with walnuts, and drove over, rehearsing small talk in my head. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe Lydia had just been nervous. I wanted to believe that. But when I arrived, the building's front gate was slightly ajar, and the lights in their apartment were off except for one flickering bulb by the entrance. I rang the bell. No answer. I was about to turn away when I heard muffled voices inside. A man's voice, Daniel's, but softer than I remembered, tired. And a woman's, sharp and quick, slicing through the silence. I couldn't make out the words, only the tone. Then came a thud, the sound of something hitting the floor. My heart raced. I knocked again. "Daniel? It's me." The door opened a crack. Lydia stood there, her hair undone, her eyes slightly red. "Oh, it's you," she said, as if I were an inconvenience she'd forgotten existed. I tried to peer past her, but she shifted, blocking the view. "Daniel's asleep," she said flatly. "Rough day at work." "May I see him?" I asked. She smiled without warmth. "He needs rest." Maybe another time. Her hand was already on the door, but before she could close it, I caught a glimpse of the table behind her, a stack of unopened letters, one with my handwriting on it, the envelope I'd mailed last week. "I brought something for him," I said, forcing my tone calm. I handed her the bread. She accepted it without looking, then said, "Thank you," and shut the door. The lock clicked. I stood there for a while, listening. Silence. Then a sound that froze me in place. A quiet sob, faint but unmistakable. My son's. I drove home trembling, my thoughts spiraling. That night I called Daniel's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice shaking. "Honey, it's Mom. I just wanted to make sure you're all right. Call me, please." He didn't. A week passed. Then, on a Sunday morning, my phone rang. Lydia's name flashed on the screen. My heart skipped. I answered quickly. "Lydia?" Her tone was syrupy sweet. "Hello, Mrs. Harris. How are you?" Before I could respond, she continued. "I just wanted to remind you that the $600 monthly rent's due. Daniel said you usually help out with that, right? Did you transfer it yet?" I froze. "Excuse me?" "The $600 monthly rent," she repeated, as if speaking to a child. "Daniel said you always make sure it's paid on time." My grip tightened on the phone. "Didn't I tell you?" I said slowly. "I don't pay for married men's rent, especially ones who forgot to invite their mother to the wedding." There was a pause. Then she laughed, soft but cutting. "Oh, I see. You're upset. That's understandable. But you wouldn't want your son to get evicted, would you?" Her tone shifted, becoming something else, something cold. "You'd be surprised how quickly a home can fall apart when people stop helping." Before I could respond, she hung up. 3 days after Lydia's call, I received a text from Daniel. Just one line. "Hey, Mom, everything's fine. Don't worry, no emojis, no warmth, just that." I read it over and over, each time feeling that familiar ache twist deeper. He was trying to reassure me, but the message sounded rehearsed, distant, like someone was watching him type. I called him immediately. No answer. I called again. The line went dead after one ring. I sat there staring at the phone until my hands began to shake. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to his office. Daniel worked at an architecture firm downtown. When I arrived, the receptionist recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Harris," she greeted warmly. "It's been a while." "Yes," I said, forcing a smile. "Is Daniel in?" Her face changed. "He hasn't been around much lately," she said carefully. "He took some time off." "Time off?" I repeated. She nodded. "His wife came by last week to collect some documents. She said they'd be working from home for a while." I thanked her and left, my pulse pounding. Lydia was everywhere, taking his calls, managing his work, speaking for him. It felt like she had wrapped her hands around his life and was slowly squeezing. When I got back to my car, I noticed something strange. On the passenger seat was an envelope, plain, unmarked. My heart jumped. I hadn't brought it there. Someone must have slipped it in while I was inside. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was Daniel, standing near an ATM. His shoulders hunched, his face pale. And beside him, Lydia, whispering something close to his ear while holding his card. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. Scrawled on the back in black ink were 3 words: "He's not safe." My heart nearly stopped. I looked around the parking lot, but it was empty. Just the rain tapping softly on the windshield. Who had left it? And why? I drove straight home, every nerve on edge. The house felt colder than usual, shadows stretching long across the walls. I locked the doors and sat in the kitchen, staring at the photo again. My mind raced through possibilities. Was Lydia blackmailing him? Controlling him through debt? Threats? Love twisted into fear? At midnight, my phone lit up. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. Relief flooded through me until I answered. "Daniel?" But it wasn't his voice. It was hers. "Mrs. Harris," Lydia said softly, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "It's late. You shouldn't be snooping around." My blood ran cold. "What did you say?" "You heard me," she replied. "Next time you go to his office, at least park somewhere discreet. People notice things." I couldn't breathe. "Where is my son?" I demanded. She chuckled, low and deliberate. "He's right here, resting. You don't need to worry about him anymore. Let me speak to him." "Oh, I will," she said. "Tomorrow, if you behave." Then the line went dead. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, lights off, waiting for morning, clutching that photo like it was a lifeline. Somewhere deep inside, I made a silent vow. If she thought fear would keep me away, she'd soon learn she married the wrong mother's son. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. The screen flashed with an unknown number. My heart leapt before my mind could even catch up. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Harris?" The voice was quiet, male, uncertain. "Please don't hang up." "I work at the bank, your branch." I sat up. "Yes? What is this about?" "There was an attempt to change your account's contact details yesterday. Someone tried to link your number to a different profile. We flagged it because of your security history." "Who tried to change it?" There was a pause on the line, the sound of shuffling papers. "A woman," he said finally. "Lydia Harris." The name hit me like a brick. My mouth went dry. "Did she come in person?" "No, ma'am. It was online, but we traced the IP address to a hotel. The address is on your file if you'd like to verify it." I thanked him and wrote down the name of the hotel with shaking hands. Then I sat there for a long moment, staring at the address written in my notebook. She was bold, too bold. I didn't know what scared me more, that she had the nerve to impersonate me, or that she thought she could get away with it. By noon, I was standing in front of that hotel. It was one of those sleek, expensive places in the city center where the staff smiled like they were guarding secrets. I walked up to the reception desk, feigning calm. "Good afternoon," I said. "My son and his wife are staying here, Daniel and Lydia Harris. I'm supposed to drop something off for them." The receptionist typed something quickly, then hesitated. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "They checked out this morning." My heart sank. "Do you know where they went?" She shook her head. "No forwarding address." But she lowered her voice. The manager mentioned there was some kind of argument. Your son seemed distressed. I thanked her, left the envelope with my phone number, and stepped back into the street. Distressed. That word replayed over and over as I walked aimlessly through the crowd. Back home, I checked Daniel's social media again. His accounts were still up, but something was off. The photos of him, smiling at work events, laughing with old friends, had vanished overnight. All that remained were 2 pictures Lydia had posted, one of their wedding, blurry and low-lit, and one of them standing in front of a car I'd never seen before. The caption read, "New beginnings. Only for special people." My chest tightened. That phrase again. Special people. I didn't understand what it meant, but it wasn't affection. It was mockery. Hours passed. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept circling back to that phone call. And then, just before sunset, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, a small brown parcel sat on the mat. No address, no sender's name. I brought it inside, half expecting it to explode from the tension in my chest. Inside the box was a single USB drive and a folded piece of paper. 3 words were written in Daniel's handwriting. Trust no one. My hands trembled as I plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing a folder filled with video files. Each clip was time-stamped, and recordings from their apartment, apparently filmed from a hidden camera. I opened the first one. Daniel sat at the dining table, head in his hands, while Lydia paced back and forth. "You said it was done," she hissed. "It is," he whispered. "But she'll notice." "My mother always notices." Lydia slammed her hands on the table. "Then make her stop noticing." The video ended abruptly. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The next clip showed Lydia on the phone, whispering into the receiver. "Yes, she has savings. A lot. But he won't move until I say so. Just trust me." That night, sleep refused to come. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to whisper my name. Daniel's note, "Trust no one," echoed in my mind like a curse. I replayed the videos again and again, searching for clues, for context, for any sign that this was some twisted misunderstanding. But the more I watched, the clearer it became. Lydia was dangerous, and my son was drowning in something he couldn't escape. At dawn, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit here waiting for another call or another threat wrapped in polite words. I needed answers. I needed to know who was really behind all this. I drove to Daniel's old apartment, the one he'd shared with Lydia before they moved in together after the so-called wedding. The landlord, an older man with tired eyes, opened the door halfway, suspicious. "You his mother?" he asked when I introduced myself. "Yes, I need to pick up some of his things. He left in a hurry." The man hesitated, then sighed. "You better hurry." "The place has been empty a week. She came back for a few boxes, but he didn't." "She?" "The wife." "Lydia." His tone turned sharp. "She said not to let anyone in." "But I figured your family." He stepped aside. The moment I walked in, a cold smell of dust and something metallic hit me. The curtains were half drawn, the furniture gone except for a single chair and a pile of envelopes on the counter. I opened one. A late rent notice. Another, an unpaid credit card bill. Another, an eviction warning. It didn't make sense. Daniel had a stable job, savings. Why was he months behind on payments? Then I saw it. An envelope with my name scrawled on the front. My stomach clenched as I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means things got worse. Don't believe Lydia. Don't believe anyone who calls on her behalf. They want control of me, of the money, of everything. Please, stay away from them. And whatever you do, don't send money. I'll explain when I can. I love you." The paper slipped from my hands. A wave of nausea washed over me. I wanted to call him right then, but when I tried, his number was unreachable. Then my phone rang. A familiar voice, sweet but sharp as broken glass. Lydia. "Good morning, Mom," she said, her tone dripping with false cheer. "I was just thinking of you." "Did you get our wedding invitation?" My throat tightened. "Lydia, where's my son?" "Oh, Daniel's fine. He's just taking some time, adjusting to married life, you know." She giggled, and the sound curdled my blood. "By the way, I tried calling earlier. The rent's overdue. You were going to help with that, remember?" Her words burned like acid. "Why would I pay your rent?" "Because Daniel said you would." "Well," I said slowly, my voice turning cold, "didn't I tell you? I don't fund strangers, especially ones who lie." The silence that followed was sharp and electric. Then her voice dropped its sweetness. "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Harris. You think you understand, but you don't. You're just like him, always assuming you know better." "What have you done to him?" "You'll find out soon enough," she said softly. "Just be careful who you trust." The line went dead. I stood there frozen, the letter still trembling in my hand. I could feel the walls closing in, the $600 monthly rent notices, the empty apartment, the cold air pressing against my chest. This wasn't just about money or family drama. Lydia was playing a deeper game. As I left the apartment, I caught something glinting under the loose floorboard near the door. I knelt and pulled it free, a second USB drive, smaller, taped beneath the wood. My hands shook as I pocketed it. The drive home felt like a nightmare that refused to end. Every car behind me looked suspicious, every turn too sharp, every light too long. The dark sedan followed for 10 minutes before vanishing into traffic, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. It sank deeper, like a stain I couldn't wash off. When I reached my driveway, I stayed in the car for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe. I wasn't going to let fear win. Not tonight. Inside, the house was silent, but not peaceful. I locked every door, drew the curtains, and turned on only one lamp. My reflection in the window looked older, harder. Then I remembered the USB in my coat pocket. I took it out and stared at it like it was alive. The first one had shown me lies. Maybe this one held the truth. The moment I plugged it into my laptop, a folder opened automatically. Inside were just 2 files, 1 video, 1 audio. My pulse quickened. I opened the video first. It was security footage from what looked like a dimly lit room, maybe a warehouse or a basement. Daniel sat tied to a chair, his face bruised, his eyes swollen. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was staring past it, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then another figure stepped into frame. Lydia. She looked nothing like the nervous woman I'd first met. Her face was cold, detached. She crouched beside him, whispered something into his ear, and smiled. Then she turned toward the camera. For a split second, her gaze met mine through the screen, as if she knew I'd be watching one day. The video cut off. I sat frozen, my hand over my mouth. My son was alive, hurt but alive. And Lydia wasn't acting alone. Someone was filming. I played the audio file next. It was faint, distorted, like a recording made through a wall. I could make out fragments, Daniel's voice begging, Lydia's answering laughter, and then a third voice, male, calm, controlled. "Remember the deal," the man said. "Once she transfers the money, we disappear. She's old. She won't fight back. Old." The word echoed in my skull like a gunshot. That's what I was to them, a target, a helpless old woman they could manipulate. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I copied the files to a separate drive and deleted the originals. If they were tracking the device, I didn't want them to know what I'd seen. Then I printed Daniel's letter and hid it inside an old cookbook on the shelf. I was careful now, too careful. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from a blocked number. "Stop digging or you'll lose him for good." I felt the air leave my lungs. I wanted to call the police, but what would I say? That my daughter-in-law faked her identity and my son was kidnapped by someone I couldn't name? They'd call it a domestic dispute. No one would believe me. Instead, I called the only person who still might, Detective Miles, a retired officer who used to live across the street. He answered groggily, "Mrs. Harris?" "It's late." "I know," I said, "but it's about my son. I think he's in danger." I told him everything, the videos, the bank calls, the threats. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he exhaled heavily. "You should have come sooner." "Give me the files. I'll see what I can do." I agreed to meet him at a diner near the old train station the next morning. When dawn broke, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror. There was no trace of the polite mother who once apologized for everything. This version of me was sharper, colder, carved by fear and fury. As I walked out the door, my phone rang again. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the preview of the message. A photo. Daniel, blindfolded, his hands bound, and beneath it, a text. "You have 24 hours, or he disappears forever." He arrived right on time, trench coat buttoned, gray hair slicked back, eyes sharp as ever. "You look like hell," he said as he slid into the booth. "Feels accurate," I replied. I pushed the flash drive toward him. "This has everything. The video, the audio, the messages." He didn't touch it immediately. "You sure you want me involved, Mrs. Harris?" "Once I start digging, there's no walking this back." I nodded. "They have my son." He sighed, pocketing the drive. "Then we'll find him. But you need to stay put. Stay quiet. Don't talk to Lydia. Don't respond to any messages." "Too late," I said. "They already sent a picture." I showed him the photo of Daniel, bound and blindfolded. Miles's jaw tightened. "That changes things," he muttered. "They're escalating." He stood. "Let me make a few calls. Keep your phone on." The bell jingled as he left. I tried to sip my coffee, but my hands were trembling too hard. I didn't even notice the man in the leather jacket across the room until he looked straight at me, no attempt to hide it. His stare was cold, direct. He didn't blink. Then he smiled, a small, knowing smirk. I froze. My instincts screamed danger. He got up, tossed a few bills on the counter, and walked out. I waited 5 minutes before following, heart pounding. The street outside was empty, slick with drizzle, but as I turned toward my car, there was an envelope tucked beneath the wiper. My name, written in black ink. I tore it open. Inside was a single line typed on plain white paper. "You shouldn't have involved him." I spun around, scanning the street. Nothing but silence and shadows. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and sped away. By the time I reached home, Miles had texted, "We need to talk, urgent." I called immediately. He didn't answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. Something in my chest tightened. I drove to his house, praying I was overreacting. The lights were off, the driveway empty, but the front door was slightly ajar. I hesitated only a second before pushing it open. The smell hit me first, metallic, heavy. Blood. "Miles?" My voice came out shaky, small. No answer. I stepped inside. The living room was a mess, drawers open, papers scattered. On the floor, near the coffee table, was Miles, motionless, a dark stain spreading beneath him. I staggered backward, hand over my mouth. Then I saw it, a phone in his hand, the screen still glowing. A text draft unfinished. "Found something. Check Lydia's real name." Before I could read the rest, a sound came from behind me. A creak. Floorboards shifting. Someone else was in the house. I turned slowly, every muscle stiff with fear. A shadow moved down the hallway, tall, silent, purposeful. I bolted toward the back door, stumbling over a chair. My fingers fumbled with the lock, but adrenaline took over. I shoved it open and ran into the night. Cold air burned my lungs as I sprinted through the yard, across the street, into the neighbor's garden. I crouched behind a hedge, gasping, listening. The front door of Miles's house swung wider, and the figure stepped onto the porch. Even from a distance, I recognized her. Lydia. She looked calm, collected. Her coat was spotless, her hair perfect, like she hadn't just walked through a crime scene. She stood there a moment, scanning the street, then spoke softly into her phone. "Clean it up." "She's next." Then she smiled. That same smirk she'd given me the day I asked about their wedding. And just like that, she disappeared into the darkness, leaving me trembling in the cold. Clutching the last piece of truth I had left, Miles's phone, stolen from his hand before I ran. I didn't remember driving home. One moment I was crouched behind the hedge, shaking so hard I could barely breathe, and the next I was standing in my living room with the lights off, Miles's phone gripped tight in my hand. My mind was a blur of fear and disbelief. Lydia, calm, confident, covered in someone else's blood, and completely unbothered. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't afford noise. Not now, not when she knew where I lived. I locked every door twice and went straight to my laptop. I needed to know what Miles had found before he died. His message had mentioned Lydia's real name. I powered on his phone. No password. It opened immediately. A blessing, or maybe he'd known he wouldn't have much time. My stomach turned at the thought. The text app opened with that unfinished message. "Found something. Check Lydia's real name." I scrolled through his recent searches, hoping for clues. There it was, an email draft with attached screenshots. Birth records, aliases, financial transfers. Lydia wasn't Lydia at all. Her real name was Kara Jensen, a con artist with a record in 3 states, fraud, identity theft, and one case that looked eerily familiar, an older woman who'd vanished after transferring her $127,000 savings to a family member in need. My blood ran cold. I downloaded everything onto a flash drive and printed what I could. The sound of the printer seemed deafening in the quiet house. My hands trembled as I gathered the papers. Every page was another layer of deceit. Lydia, or Kara, had planned this long before Daniel ever met her. She wasn't a wife, she was a predator, and my son was just her latest target. My phone buzzed again. A new message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. "You should have stayed out of it, Evelyn." I froze. My eyes darted to the window. The curtains were drawn, but I could feel eyes on me. I reached for the nearest object, a metal candlestick, and crept closer. Slowly I pulled the curtain back just enough to see the street. Empty, except for a car parked across the road, engine running, lights off. I didn't wait to find out who was inside. I backed away, grabbed my bag, shoved the flash drive and papers inside, and slipped out the back door. My heart hammered as I cut through the alley and ran toward the one place Lydia wouldn't expect me to go, the police station. It was nearly midnight when I got there, breathless and soaked from the drizzle. The night officer looked up, startled. "Ma'am, can I help you?" "I need to report a kidnapping," I said, my voice cracking. "And a murder." His expression shifted instantly. Within minutes, I was sitting in a small interview room under buzzing fluorescent lights, explaining everything. The videos, the threats, the photo of Daniel, and Miles's death. They listened, but I could see it in their eyes. Skepticism. The story was too wild, too tangled. Finally, one of them asked, "Do you have any proof?" I handed over the flash drive. "Everything you need is on there." They took it, promised to look into it, and asked me to stay with a relative for safety. But I had no one left nearby. Daniel was gone, and Lydia had made sure of that. The house was so silent that even the ticking clock sounded like footsteps. I moved slowly toward the hallway, every creak of the floorboards making my breath hitch. The bedroom door was now fully closed. I could see the faint shadow of movement beneath it, too calm, too deliberate. Whoever was in there wasn't hiding. They were waiting. I gripped the handle. My pulse pounded in my throat. I counted silently in my head, 1, 2, 3, then flung the door open and swung the candlestick. The figure stepped aside with terrifying speed. My arm sliced through air. A hand caught my wrist mid-swing. "Easy, Mrs. Walker." It was Officer Haynes, the detective I'd spoken to hours ago. He raised his hand slightly, eyes steady. "I didn't mean to scare you." I stumbled back, shaking. "How did you get in here?" "You weren't answering your phone," he said. "We found something on that flash drive you gave us." "I needed to warn you before—" He stopped mid-sentence, looking past me. His jaw tightened. "Before she does." Before I could ask what he meant, a sound came from the back door, a faint metallic clink. He motioned for me to stay quiet and drew his weapon. My body went cold. He moved toward the kitchen with controlled steps, and I followed despite myself, heart thudding so hard I thought it might explode. The back door was cracked open. The wind whispered through it, carrying the faint scent of rain. And something else. Perfume. That same sickly sweet scent Lydia wore like armor. Haynes turned, whispering, "Stay behind me." Before he could reach the door, it swung wide open. A flash of movement. A shadow darted across the porch. Then, silence. The detective stepped outside, gun raised. I waited, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. A gunshot shattered the night. I screamed before I realized I was running. Out the door, into the cold, wet air. Haynes lay on the ground, blood spreading dark across his shoulder. He was alive but barely conscious. The bullet had missed his heart. I dropped to my knees beside him. She's gone," he gasped. "She took something, your phone." Before I could answer, a car engine roared to life down the street. I looked up just in time to see her, Lydia, behind the wheel of my car, her hair wild in the wind, her eyes catching mine in the darkness. She smiled, that same damn smirk. I wanted to chase her, but Haynes groaned beside me. I pressed my hands against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. My phone, my only proof, my messages, my contacts was gone. Within minutes, flashing lights bathed the neighborhood in red and blue. Paramedics rushed Haynes into an ambulance while another officer questioned me. I could barely speak. Every word felt like glass in my throat. She took my phone. She knows everything. My address, my emails, The officer nodded gravely. "We'll issue a warrant. We'll find her." But the look in his eyes said otherwise. By the time the paramedics left, the rain had stopped. The street glistened under the streetlights, empty except for my half-open door and the faint trail of blood on the porch. I walked back inside, drenched and trembling. On the floor, near the entryway, was a single object I hadn't noticed before. A wedding invitation, cream-colored, embossed, elegant. No stamp, no envelope. Just my name scrawled across it in looping script. I turned it over. The words written on the back made my stomach twist into knots. "You're invited to the real celebration. Tomorrow at noon. Don't be late. Family should stick together." Beneath it, a single drop of red ink, or maybe blood, had smeared across the corner. I stared at it until my vision blurred. The wedding wasn't over. It was just beginning. The invitation lay on the counter, taunting me. I'd spent half the night staring at it, trying to decide if it was a trap. Of course it was. But staying away wouldn't stop her. Lydia never played defense. She attacked. And if I didn't face her, she'd just find another way to crawl into my life. At 11:15, I put on a dark coat, slid my wedding ring into my pocket, a reminder of the family she was trying to destroy, and left the house. The sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that pressed down on you like a warning. I drove slowly, every streetlight feeling like it lingered longer than usual, as if the city itself didn't want me to go. The address on the card led me to the edge of town, where the road narrowed into gravel and the trees thickened. Eventually, the driveway appeared, lined with ivy and half hidden behind an old wooden gate. I parked, heart pounding, and stepped out. The house before me wasn't new. It was the kind of place that had seen too much. The windows were veiled with dust, the paint peeling. And yet, on the front porch, a bouquet of fresh lilies rested against the door. White lilies, funeral flowers. I was about to turn back when I heard laughter, faint, echoing, a woman's laugh, Lydia's. I followed the sound through the front door, which swung open with a slow creak. Inside, the air was cold and still. The place was decorated like it was frozen in time. Lace curtains, faded photographs, an upright piano in the corner. On the table sat a wedding cake, real, 3 tiers, freshly frosted, and on top of it, 2 figurines, a bride and groom, except the bride's face had been painted over with red ink, and the groom's was scratched out entirely. "Welcome to the reception." Lydia's voice floated from somewhere upstairs. "You're just in time, mother-in-law." Her words slithered through the house. I gripped the banister and climbed the stairs slowly, my heartbeat sinking with the creak of each step. At the top, a hallway stretched ahead, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. She appeared from one of the rooms, dressed in white. Not the elegant kind of white, but something off, too bright, too theatrical. Her hair was loose, her lipstick smudged. She smiled, holding my phone in her hand like a prize. "You got my invitation." "What do you want, Lydia?" She tilted her head, mock innocence in her eyes. "A family reunion." "Isn't that what you wanted? You asked when the wedding was, didn't you?" She stepped closer. "Well, here it is." I glanced past her into the room. My stomach turned. It was covered in wedding decorations, white ribbons, candles, and in the center, a framed photo of my son and Lydia. But someone had drawn an X through my face in the corner of the picture. "You think this is about money?" she said, circling me. "It's not. It's about respect. Your son thought he could marry me and hide me from you. You thought you could buy my silence. But I married him yesterday, remember? Just for special people." Her smirk sharpened. "And now we're celebrating our new beginning." "By terrorizing me? Oh, please." "Don't act like a victim. You raised him. You made him weak." Her voice dripped venom. But beneath the rage, I saw something else. Fear. She was unraveling. "Where is he, Lydia?" I demanded. "Where's my son?" She froze, her eyes flickering just long enough to confirm what I already knew. He wasn't here. Or worse, she didn't know where he was either. Before I could press further, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. Lydia's head snapped toward the noise, her smirk fading. I didn't wait. I ran down the stairs, nearly tripping over my own feet. The front door had burst open, wind whipping through the house, and there, standing in the doorway, bloodied, pale, trembling, was my son. "Mom," he gasped. "She's not who you think she is." For a heartbeat, everything around me went still, the ticking clock, the trembling curtains, even the air. My son stood there in the doorway, his shirt ripped, streaks of dried blood across his face and collar. His eyes darted from me to Lydia, who was frozen halfway down the stairs. It was as if the world had cracked in two, and we were all standing at the edge, waiting to see who would fall first. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice breaking. "What happened to you?" He stumbled forward, one hand clutching the banister for balance. "She locked me up, Mom. I've been in her friend's basement since Tuesday. She told me it was for my own good, that we needed time to adjust before we told you." His voice cracked, raw with exhaustion. "She said if I tried to leave, she'd tell the police you paid her to marry me for money." My eyes shot to Lydia. Her smirk was gone, replaced with a cold, flat expression that terrified me more than any of her theatrics. "You shouldn't have come here," she said quietly, stepping off the last stair. "You were supposed to wait." "Wait for what?" Daniel shouted. "For you to finish whatever game this is?" Lydia's jaw twitched. She looked at him with something that almost resembled pity. "You still don't understand, do you? I loved you. I gave up everything for you." "You kidnapped me," he spat. "You stole my phone, you—" "Because you were going to leave," she snapped, her voice rising, brittle and sharp. "You were texting your ex, Daniel." You were planning to leave me after everything I did for you. I took a step forward, my instincts roaring to shield him. Lydia, whatever this is, it ends now. Her eyes flicked toward me, and for the first time I saw real hatred there, deep and seething. You did this, she hissed. He never respected me because of you. You poisoned him against me, always comparing me to the kind of woman you think is good enough for your son. Well, guess what? He chose me. Chose? I echoed. You trapped him. Daniel's face went pale. You told me that was a joke. You said, quote, I said a lot of things. She stepped closer, reaching into her coat pocket. My pulse spiked. Something glinted under her hand, metallic, cold. Lydia, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. Put it down. She didn't. She pulled the gun out, small and sleek, her hand trembling only slightly. You ruined everything, she said. I gave him love, and you made him ashamed of it. You wanted me gone. Well, I'm not leaving alone. Daniel moved before I could stop him. He lunged at her, shouting, No! The sound of the gunshot ripped through the air, deafening and sharp. I screamed. For a moment, I couldn't tell who'd been hit until I saw Daniel drop to his knees, clutching his arm, blood soaking through his sleeve. Daniel! I rushed forward, heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. Daniel was crumpled against the floor, his arms slick with blood where the bullet had grazed him. Lydia stood frozen a few feet away, her hand trembling, the gun shaking wildly, as if even it wanted to escape her grasp. I didn't mean, she started, voice thin and breaking. But the sound of sirens cut her off. Louder now, closer. A pulsing wail filled the air and her eyes with panic. They followed me, she muttered, stepping back, her gaze flicking between the window and the door. You called them. You did this. I dropped to my knees beside Daniel, pressing my scarf hard against his wound. Stay with me, baby. Please, stay with me, I whispered, my voice trembling as the fabric darkened with red. He winced but nodded faintly, his breath shallow, his skin pale. Lydia's breathing quickened. She took another step back, her free hand trembling at her side. You don't understand, she said, the words spilling out like a confession no one had asked for. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Red and blue lights washed over the room, flashing through the curtains. Tires screeched outside, doors slammed, and then, Police! Drop the weapon! The voice was sharp, commanding, unmistakably familiar. Detective Miles. Officers flooded in, 3, 4 of them, guns drawn, voices layered over one another. Hands where we can see them! On your knees! Now! Detective Miles stepped forward, his tone steady, formal, but there was something almost weary in his eyes. Lydia Harris, also known as Kara Jensen, he said clearly, you're under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder. Daniel looked up at me weakly. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have listened. I shook my head, gripping his hand. Don't talk. You're going to be fine. Do you hear me? The sirens stopped outside, doors slammed, officers shouted. But all I could hear was the fading echo of Lydia's laughter in my mind, that hollow, chilling sound that told me this wasn't over. The house was still vibrating with the echo of sirens when they finally led her away. Lydia's hair was plastered to her face, her wrists bound, her eyes wild, but even then she had that same faint smirk, that same unshakable defiance. I stood at the window as they pushed her into the back of the police car, her head turning just enough to find me. And when she did, her lips moved. No sound, just one word. Soon. Even after the car disappeared, her presence clung to the air like smoke. Daniel was at the hospital by then, the bullet having grazed his arm, but sparing him something worse. The doctor said he'd heal, physically at least. He wasn't just bleeding from his arm, he was bleeding from everything she'd taken. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. the hum of the fridge, the groan of the pipes, the whisper of the wind against the window. I kept expecting to hear her laugh again, that eerie, half-sweet sound that used to echo down my hallway when she thought no one was listening. By morning, the news had already spread. "Local woman charged with kidnapping and assault," the headline read. But the article barely scratched the surface. They didn't know what she was capable of. 6 months later, justice came, not with fireworks or shouting, but in the quiet echo of a gavel. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Reporters lined the back row, their pens scratching as if they could capture what this moment really meant. I sat in the second row, hands clasped tightly in my lap. The ache in my fingers had become familiar over the months of hearings and interviews and testimonies. Lydia sat across the room, or rather, Kara Jensen. Even now, it was hard to think of her by that name. Her hair was neatly pinned, her suit pressed. She looked composed, too composed. If I hadn't known better, I might have thought she was the one presiding over the trial, not standing accused. Detective Miles took the stand, his voice steady as he laid out the story piece by piece. "The defendant," he said, "has used the aliases Lydia Harris, Kara Jensen, and Emily Ford. She's wanted in 3 states, Arizona, Washington, and Oregon, for a series of confidence schemes targeting elderly women with substantial savings. Each case followed the same pattern: emotional isolation, fraudulent marriage arrangements, financial exploitation." I stared straight ahead, afraid that if I looked at her, I might crumble. Miles continued, his words slicing through the silence. "From Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, the defendant stole $127,000 through unauthorized withdrawals. From her son's account, $43,000 in wire transfers. Total damages exceed $170,000. The judge nodded, flipping through pages of documents. "And the prior offenses?" "In Phoenix," Miles said, "she took $89,000 from a widow named Margaret Torres. In Seattle, $67,000 from Rita Chen. She's repeated this 6 times in total, Your Honor." The judge's eyes lifted, meeting Lydia's, or Kara's, without expression. "You've left a trail of ruined lives behind you," he said. "Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" She stood. For a moment, I wondered if she'd finally apologize, if she'd admit what she'd done, if she'd feel something. But her voice was calm, even polite. "I only ever wanted a family," she said. That was when I finally looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see power or control or charm. I saw a hollow woman who'd built her life on pretending to be someone else. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Lydia Harris, also known as Kara Jensen, this court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder." The sound of the gavel was soft, almost gentle, but it struck through me like thunder. She didn't turn around as they cuffed her, didn't look for me, didn't look for anyone. She just walked forward, shoulders straight, until the door closed behind her. I stayed seated long after the room emptied, hands still folded, as if letting go would make it real. Justice, I realized, isn't loud or glorious. It doesn't always bring relief. Sometimes it just ends things, and that, finally, was enough. After the sentencing, silence became my closest companion. The kind of silence that settles in a house when all the shouting, crying, and pleading have finally burned themselves out. Daniel moved back home a few weeks later. There wasn't a conversation about it, just a soft knock one evening, and there he was, standing in the doorway with a single box and eyes that had seen too much. I didn't ask questions. I just stepped aside and he walked in. The apartment, the one I'd been paying $600 a month for, went up for sale that same month. 14 months of rent, $8,400 in total. Money I'd convinced myself was helping him build a future. In truth, it had been padding Lydia's pockets while she drained the rest of our lives away. When the judge ordered her to repay it from the seized assets, I didn't celebrate. Restitution doesn't heal trust. It just closes a column on a ledger. The day I got the notice from the court confirming repayment, I didn't frame it or file it. I folded it in half and tucked it in the back of a drawer with the rest of the paperwork, police reports, bank statements, and photographs that once proved I wasn't imagining the nightmare. Now they were just relics. Daniel and I rarely talked about her. There wasn't much to say that hadn't already been said under fluorescent lights in interrogation rooms or whispered through tears in the dark. Sometimes I'd catch him pausing near the window, staring out as though expecting a shadow to move, but then he'd blink and let it go. Slowly, life began to take its shape again, small, ordinary, and blessedly uneventful. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was peace, a fragile, earned peace. It arrived 6 months after the sentencing, a plain envelope with my name written in looping, deliberate handwriting. No return address, just the correctional facility's stamp pressed into the corner like a bruise. For a full minute, I couldn't move. The world went still around me. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint rustle of wind through the blinds. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Lydia. Or Kara. I wasn't sure which name belonged to the woman who had sat in my living room and called me Mom. I turned the envelope over in my hands. The paper was thin, almost fragile, as though even it wasn't sure it could hold the weight of her words. My name was written in the same perfect cursive she'd used on the wedding invitations. I remember admiring it once, thinking how graceful she was, how composed. Funny, how small details carry entire betrayals. For a moment, I thought of opening it. I imagined what it might say. Maybe she wanted forgiveness. Maybe she wanted to remind me of the version of herself she'd tried to sell me, the kind, soft-spoken woman who said she loved my son. Or maybe she wanted to twist the knife one last time, to remind me that she'd won in ways that couldn't be measured in dollars. But then I remembered the courtroom, her calm expression as the judge read her sentence. No tears, no apology, just that same small, detached smile, the one that used to fool me into believing she meant well. I placed the letter on the counter. I went about my day, washed dishes, folded laundry, fed the cat. But it was there, a ghost on the table, waiting for acknowledgement. Every time I walked past, I felt its pull, soft but steady, like gravity. By evening I'd had enough. I carried it out to the backyard, where the air smelled faintly of rain and cut grass. The sun was setting low, painting the world in muted gold. I set the envelope on the old, rusted grill that hadn't been used since Daniel's last birthday. For a second, I hesitated, not because I was uncertain, but because I realized this was the last connection. After this, there would be nothing left of her but memory. I struck a match. The flame caught immediately, the paper curling back on itself, blackening as it burned. I watched it twist and shrivel, watched the fire eat through the edges of my name. The ink ran, turning to smoke, and then it was gone, nothing but a smear of ash and a wisp of gray rising into the fading sky. I didn't feel relief. Not exactly. It wasn't joy either. It was something quieter, the kind of peace that doesn't come with answers, only acceptance. The house behind me was silent. No echoes of arguments, no traces of lies, no reminders of what had been lost. Just silence. Inside, the clock kept ticking, steady and patient, as if to remind me that life continues even after it's been broken. I poured myself a glass of water, stood at the window, and watched the smoke disappear into the night. Whatever she'd written didn't matter. Whether it was regret or manipulation, apology or justification, it no longer belonged to me. I'd already given her enough. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in years. Some endings don't need to be understood. They just need to be over. Thanks for spending time with this story. If it moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more true life stories to light.